Hello and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. Simon, wow. Do you feel drained, slightly drained after another historic end to the slam season in tennis? I feel like what we've seen over the past couple of weeks in New York could have fit into a couple months, maybe a year, but no, we got it all in a pretty quick jolt.
Yes, that and combined with the fact that the outside air in the place that I'm living is currently considered unhealthy and I'm having to walk around in a mask just to survive, which is always less than desirable. I believe Vancouver has the worst air quality in the world as we currently sit here and record, which is less than good, shall we say. But it more than the tennis that we watched more than made up for a pretty shitty week here in Vancouver. And my goodness, what an end to the year, Dev.
Phenomenal end to the year. Condolences on that. Vancouver trivia. That does not sound great at all. But I do feel like the US Open comes at an interesting time, as always, in the calendar. Obviously, if you have kids or you are in school and you're going back to school, it does feel like a new leaf is being turned. But I often feel like the fact that the US Open does fall when it does, Simon, is it lends credence to people maybe too easily falling on that narrative or using that narrative to further their point, talking about a sense of newness, a sense of regeneration. But as I admonish these fictitious people relying on this old trope, I have to say, this slam did feel like the birth of something new and the birth of something consistent going forward.
Well, I think you're alluding to our two winners, and it's been coming all season. Like, these two players have really been head and shoulders above the rest of the tour, save for another Spaniard who managed to somehow make his body conform in ways that we didn't think was possible by winning 2 Grand Slams in Rafael Nadal. Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz have been truly a revelation, and it's been beautiful to watch. It really has. I'm so happy. I think you can probably hear it in my voice that I think our sport needed a jolt. It needed a shot in the arm, and it got it like crazy during the course of the year. It's just so awesome to watch. And I think we'll come on to it in a second, but I think just speaking from a personal perspective, there's a tendency sometimes to fall into habits when you're watching a sport like this and think you know everything and think you've seen everything. And then to see two young phenoms come along, both of who I think are really cool young people who have some good things to say and who are just like nice, generally good people, it just makes you feel so much better about the sport that you spend so much time investing in.
I have to say, I've known you for a while, Simon, and it's been a long time since you've earnestly said, I love this sport in regards to something that's happening on the court or around the game. Because honestly, it's deserved, and the skepticism has been deserved, but it was nice to see that just from an outsider's perspective as well, because it has been quite a ridiculous sport to follow at times as well this season. And at the end of the day, when we do talk about the two winners and then go on to some other amazing stories, including history on the doubles side, the women's doubles side, and some historic firsts in terms of tournaments beginning that were in place before for some of the wheelchair athletes, I think this tournament as a whole left a good taste in my mouth, and the complete 180 that is taking place regarding the US Open and us, Simon, has been remarkable to watch, as we now call it easily our favorite slam, the good slam.
The happy slam, take that, Australia. I want everyone to cast their minds back to the first week of January and the absolute shit show that the sport of tennis faced, with the world number one on the men's side being barred entry into the country of Australia for the first major of the year. And then contrast that with the love, really, that we're feeling at the moment for all 4 finalists on both the men's and the women's side, who you can really stand up and say are good, nice people, and people that are very easy to cheer for and like in a lot of ways. And I think that is one thing that we were missing a lot of the time, just through the cacophony of shit that's occurred throughout the year, with sexual assault allegations, with players making it to positions that really shouldn't have been. And then you end up this to have, admittedly, not quite damp squib finals. I think they were still competitive and still interesting in their own way, but I think more it was a vibes final, and you would be happy if it went any direction that it did. And to end the way that we did, I think is just really cool.
Shall we begin with the women's champion, Iga Swiatek, Simon?
Yeah, and I mean, I called it a somewhat damp squib. I think this final was a coronation, if you will. I'm sorry, we're going to get first reference to all the things that are going on in a lot of ways. And I'm sorry, it seems like a cliche to use it, but it really does feel that way. She's been so much better than everyone else during the course of the year. And I think it has been alluded through the course of this week that she's not been in the best of health. I think it came out during the course of the week that she was dealing with an injury that she suffered at Wimbledon, and it's a thigh muscle tear, which I think explains the 4-4 record since she went on that 37-match winning streak. She's on a 7-match winning streak now, though, Dev, and she looks every bit the world number one. And it has to be said that she got posed a few challenges through the course of these 2 weeks, and I think she answered them in a way that really should be terrifying for the rest of the tour going forward.
It's totally fair. I think that the overlying sentiment, especially in our Discord, I was asking for the biggest takeaways from our folks in there, and I think Pog mentioned this. Iga being mediocre and winning on a hard court seems very significant that it does, because I think we would all agree this probably wasn't the best we've seen her play. And that doesn't really matter with the fact that at the end of the day, she's the champion of this tournament and she beat, like you said, Bush, some very formidable players. I think the Jess Pegula quarterfinal, I would not say that was the match either player would want to talk about going forward in terms of quality, but she found a way in that second set. And then Sabalenka as well. I think she started extremely poorly and it looked more like some of the Iga we had seen earlier this week, but yet again, I think she found a way to get through, and we've seen her look ridiculously clean when it comes to playing error-free tennis and just looking completely in control of her game and win. And I think in an interesting way, this Iga the hard way was more fascinating to me, because I think this final coronation, to say that word again, is, can you do this? Can you win on the biggest level playing not at your best and still be pretty high up there in terms of level? And that's just the fact that maybe her average game is good enough, Simon, to get through, and it was over the course of these 2 weeks. So I think there were some haters left, and I know I saw remarks regarding the seeds she had to face, or the women in the top 50 she had to face, and the fact that it hasn't been the toughest road, and Ash Barty's gone, and it's not the same. But I just think this was exactly the type of tournament you would need to see from someone who's going to be number one for a long time, and well worth it.
I guess the most pertinent question here is what's next on the checklist for her, because we're talking about a woman who is getting into elite company in our sport, to be a 3-time champion, to do it at 2 different Grand Slams. I believe she's the first since Serena Williams to do the French and the US Open in the same year in like a decade, is it 2 decades, thing like that? It's quite a long time anyway. But the question I have for you, and I suppose for everyone else who's listening, is, I mean, what are the goals for next year? I mean, if it's not to win all 4, then I think we're selling her short in a lot of ways, just given how much better she's been than the rest of the tournament. She's in such elite company when it comes to the amount of points that she's accumulated during the course of the year. She's over 10,000. There's, I think, 6 women in the history of the tour that have ever been that high. Dinara Safina, Wozniacki, Azarenka, Sharapova, Serena Williams, and Ashley Barty. I mean, you're talking about really elite company to be able to do that in the modern era, to get over 10,000 ranking points. That's how good her season's been. There's no reason to believe that it won't translate into next year as well.
Well, I mean, it's a really open-ended question, and it's fascinating. I think what I found interesting as well is, I would say this is a credit or a curse of the TV cameras who focus on them quite a bit, but the psychologist team or coach as well, and maybe the way they acted, Simon, I think it was, I don't know how to read into this, but I would say they were some of the more thoughtful people that were mic'd up during this introduction to coaching, legal coaching. Would you agree with that? I would say they weren't yelling platitudes or just straight up yelling or making noise for the sake of making noise. And I think it's fascinating to see maybe their impact on goal setting with her, and like what's the road that they have mapped out for the future, with the thought in mind that Iga seems pretty cognizant of the fact that this is a pretty ridiculous world to live in on a daily basis, like being a pro athlete, and how insane some of the daily asks are made of you. I think she's got a pretty good idea of this at 21. So I feel like this is a teamwork oriented thing where they have something in mind.
No, I agree with you. I think it's interesting. I was listening to Mike Vrabel, of all people, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, stay with me, everyone here. It does have I will get to a point ultimately here. And it's interesting in the fact that you have an NFL coach talking openly about the need for mental recovery from a mental health perspective and saying that it is on par with the physical recovery that you have. And I think when we talk about mental health in sports, or we talk about sports psychology, what we're always focusing on is what is a player doing on the court and how are they staying focused in the moment and handling pressure points and pressure moments. But there is also something to be said for being able to rest and relax and step away from things and then be able to come again and again back to that elite level. I think that's what we're seeing in her camp. Like, she has the ability to refocus, to stay healthy and grounded. And I think that stands her in such good stead for a long period of time that, yeah, I mean, I come back to that phrasing again. I would be scared if I was the rest of the tour, because she's done this on a hard court now. She looked all the world to me like she had figured out a lot of stuff on grass as well. And I think she has the potential to win that tournament. She goes into Australia next year being the overwhelming favorite.
From one signature display that we'll be talking about for years and years to another one, Simon, now the youngest number one in ATP history and a first-time slam winner at 19 years old. Take a victory lap, Simon. Carlos Alcaraz, your boy, the guy, even though I know you picked Jannik Sinner. And Jannik Sinner probably should have won that epic match they had, which we'll talk about a bit later. But Charlie did it. Carlos Alcaraz, US Open champion. Holy hell. To say that we're not surprised, like, I am surprised. Even though we did a whole damn episode about how his ascent has been made possible and the steps he's taken here, I think just zooming out a bit and realizing his age and realizing how much time he spent on court in this tournament, which was also a record for the winner of this tournament. How many in just ridiculous matches he had to get here, Simon, and the fact that it all felt like this was the road he had to take to do this, and it was just another time to use the word coronation, but it felt like that. It felt like this was destiny almost.
No, I agree with that as well. I mean, we're in a position where, I mean, goodness me, Carlos Alcaraz is the world number one, everyone. World number one, 19 years of age, the Grand Slam champion, most tournaments won this year. I mean, everything else you could possibly say about him. It's kind of, you're gonna read so many thought pieces, you're gonna hear so many podcasts and so many people talking about what this week means and trying to find a narrative and the whole thing, that I think I'll leave it to someone else to go down that road. But I think what I wanted to say on this, just from a personal perspective and what it means emotionally to me, is that it feels fresh. Like, it feels like the tour has come alive again in a lot of ways, because I think we were getting a bit tired of the same old. And I think primarily we were getting sick of three dudes winning every single Grand Slam under the sun. And I think, with the greatest of respect to Danny Medvedev and Dominic Thiem, players that have ascended, they've gone to the top of the mountain, they've won Grand Slams, they've achieved the pinnacle of what you want to do in this sport. Did you ever think that those two players really could topple the big three in terms of, like, consistently over and over again, even going into matches, even like everything that we know? I still never gave them that respect. And maybe that's on me, but by God, I give Carlos Alcaraz that respect, because I think if he goes into a match with any of those big three guys, he's the favorite now. And I think that's the best kind of respect that I can give him at the moment.
He did a lot of incredible things this year, Bush, including beating those two of those guys in the same damn tournament. To describe his rise as being out of nowhere is false, and we know it's false, but I do think the markers that he's passed and the boxes that he's checked, and seeing a lot of his contemporaries not be able to get close to that in their rise, and really giving them the benefit of the doubt in terms of letting them grow and seeing where their game takes them. I mean, the way we talk about Steph Tsitsipas, for example, and the way he talked at his trophy celebration as well, Bush in the presentation, and saying this is something he's prepared for a long time. It sounds a bit ridiculous when you consider he's 19, but then I think it's all part of this plan that the team has had, including Juan Carlos Ferrero, who adopted a Gandalf-like figure, Bush, in the box towards the end of this tournament, because he had seen some shit. He had seen a lot of shit go down watching his guy somehow survive these matches. And I think a lot of this felt like seeing all those hard yards pay off and seeing this master plan work out, because I mean, where do we go from here? He's number one in the world, but there's a lot of things that he's doing that never been done before. And when we get into that territory, it is talking about the likes of the big three who have or had that aura about them that I think Carlos Alcaraz now does.
He's entertaining to watch. He's the pinnacle of a modern tennis player. He moves so graciously around a court, gracefully, I should say. His mind is incredible. The focus that he has on every single point. He seems like he really enjoys the sport as well. And I think that's one thing that you can really find yourself attracted to watching him as a player against some of his contemporaries, where honestly, it's turgid watching. And, bringing up some of those points of watching Denis Shapovalov or Alexander Zverev or Nick Kyrgios or any of these players that have been around, and it's just fucking awful to watch them on court, and it's so difficult to support them. And then you see someone who is actually enjoying being on court and relishing the pressure and enjoying those moments. It's really nice. It's really good, right? To actually have that. And I know not everything has to be choir boys and everything like that, but it's at the same time, you just kind of wish you could have someone to root for. And he really is that at this point.
23 hours and 39 minutes on court, Simon. As Josh from the Discord helpfully points out, also the first player since 2019 Wimbledon to win a slam saving match points. Cough, cough, Novak Djokovic. But
he didn't win that though, did he? Roger Federer won that match.
Right, that's right. Sorry, that's right. We're going to talk about the sitter match specifically, and we'll talk about Foe, obviously, Simon. But in this Alcaraz run, do you have a moment that stood out to you that was especially mind-boggling to you watching? I mean, the Cilic match ended at God knows what time, and he just went from there.
I do. I have a really big moment, and it was actually in that final game, and I think it was a microcosm of everything that is the Carlos Alcaraz experience, because he has that overhead in the middle of the court, the easiest shot.
This is the final you're talking about.
This is the final in the final
right.
game as he's serving for the match. Easiest overhead in the world. Genuinely just yeah. Roll it in and he's won. It's easiest shot he's hit all
Triple championship point. He's cruising.
Totally, right? And you can hear the commentators. Pressure's getting to him, right? It's tough to serve out a match. And he comes back with an ace and then just fucking rolls. It's so easy. Serves out his first Grand Slam like no one's business. The tears start rolling, runs up to the box. Everything's telegraphed. It looks like he's born for the moment. That's just him. That's just the experience that we've come to associate with someone who has ticked every single box. And that, I think, is extremely exciting. The moment was not too big for him at all, and he fully overcame it and is a Grand Slam champion and world number 1 at the age of 19.
A new generation is upon us. Probably can stop mockingly referring to the next gen with a smirk or a side eye, Simon. You probably can't do that anymore, right? The teens are our future.
Well, we can, but it's not useful or correct at this moment.
It's not productive. It's not useful. Frankly, it's counterproductive. Incredible stuff. I mean, I think I would echo what Simon has said regarding the positive vibes emanating from this tournament and the fact that Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz are genuinely people you do want to root for. I know that's maybe not shared by everyone, but I think overall, Simon, I felt like this tournament kind of helped us sort from the goods from the baddies. It was a great moment to see the likes of Ons Jabeur and even Casper Ruud, who I think Casper Ruud also changed some people's minds regarding his style of play and maybe some other things that we'll talk about a bit later. But I would say this Final Four that we had and the champions that we had felt like a nice culmination of a pretty interesting slam season in 2022.
I guess we can close out this first section before we get into some of the other thoughts of the tournament. And I was just curious to pick your brain on this, is that we're both early 30s, if we can classify that, maybe mid 30s, depending on how kind we feel on the day.
Jeez. Yeah.
Our people are gone in a lot of ways, even though they're not and they're still hanging around. I think both of us came into this sport from Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, Serena Williams, the Williams sisters, Roger Federer, all these people. They were kind of gone, right? And I think that's one of the narratives that's going to obviously be front and center. You have Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz running in the same tournament that Serena Williams consciously uncouples from tennis. I'm just curious how this sort of sits with you in a lot of ways, to see two teenagers or near enough teenagers come along and be the face of the sport now, because I think we've been so used to seeing the usual people winning. Like, is it the same sport that you fell in love with, or do you feel like it's different? How do you approach that now?
I do feel like I'm a bit less emotionally invested, but then there's certain moments where I feel like I'm right back there to the heyday, perhaps, of my fandom. And I think Sinner Alcaraz for me brought me back to the investment that I thought I was done making. And for that reason, I think it was a bit surprising, to be honest, but it was welcome, Simon. But I do think emotionally I found myself a bit removed from caring about the results to the extent that I did back in let's say the peak.
Yeah, and I think that comes with rivalries, doesn't it? I think that comes with certainly that relationship that you build with an individual athlete. And I think there's still time for that when you have someone so young or people so young as Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz, who you're still trying to get to know them as people and still trying to form that bond and attachment with. And I think that's different when you're growing up with an athlete and you have such reverence for them, like us watching Serena Williams or us watching Roger Federer and just being like, holy fuck, like these players are incredible. Like, I want to be like them. You know, I'm growing up and I want to be like them. And that's interesting when you arrive at, like, I'm 33 and I'm watching a 19-year-old win a Grand Slam and a 21-year-old win a third Grand Slam and just being like, well, you know, I can't really emulate them. I can't really play like them anymore. So what attachment do I have to them? And I think that more comes from watching the next generation be like good, interesting people who have good stances on the world and play in a way that's really interesting and fresh. And I think that's why I feel myself attached to our two winners in this case, because I think those are qualities that we can all admire.
I think that's well said, Simon. We'll leave that there. When we come back after the break, there's plenty other tournament moments to discuss, including our two finalists, including a new hierarchy at the top of the women's game, and our favorite moments in general. All of that coming up next on Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Simon, we've talked about the winners in Saturday and Sunday's finals, but of course, there were losers as well. Ons Jabeur, who was very close at Wimbledon. I think we would all agree she let that slip away. Was less close in this final, Simon, but still a phenomenal season for her to make two Grand Slam finals and cementing herself as the second best player on the women's tour, I think by a fair margin. I think we would not disagree with that assessment, but I don't know, Simon. I'm beginning my favorite tournament moments with talking about a bit of a sad outcome, because I think though she presented a happy figure during the trophy presentation and was typical Ons, I think there were some photos that emerged of her backstage or behind the scenes where you could see how gutted she was. I think she's someone who's been a trailblazer and making history with how far she's going in these tournaments, but it was tough to see her not be able to maintain a pretty ridiculous level that saw her take out someone like Caroline Garcia, who's as hot as they come that easily. It just wasn't there against Iga.
Yeah, it kind of fell apart a bit, didn't she? Just did not start well and then never was able to recover. And that, I think, is reflected in her own final, is that loss that Garcia suffered to Jabeur is kind of what Swiatek did to Jabeur in the final, and just in slightly different ways. But I mean, dropping serve early, not being able to recover, like all these sort of things, it's really, really tough, especially when you're playing against someone who is playing at an elite level. I think so much gets made in the sport, doesn't it, about how this is the first tournament in a while that we have on-court coaching that's legal and everything, and all the discussion about it. And then you see Ons Jabeur bawling her eyes out in a photo like that, and you're reminded of saying, should it really be just an individualistic sport? Like, this thing is fucking hard enough as it is. Having a support team around you is probably a pretty good thing to have. And, you know, yeah. I'm willing to have the discussion about what that sort of means and the inequalities in the system of different players having that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, this sport is so bloody hard, and you see it in that moment where someone just breaks down. You can only imagine what it feels like to have that emotion going through with you on court as you're trying to give a runner-up speech, very, very elegantly, very, very beautifully said, holding yourself with such grace, and then just seeing, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, just bawling her eyes out. It's a reminder that at a human level, this is extremely fucking difficult, Dev.
What do you think about the fact that the women's side sort of went to plan, and it was less random, especially less random than last year. And the fact that Iga is Iga and firmly in place as the best player in the world, but everyone else who was supposed to be there was there at the end. How did you take that?
Maybe roles have reversed from the ATP. It's been so long that we've been so used to having the same winners that it's kind of interesting in a lot of ways to see not quite role reversal of that, but something akin to it. The finalists were the world number 1 and now the world number 2. I think that's probably fair to say, given how these two players have played throughout the year. They are the world's number 1 and number 2. You could probably make the case of Coco Gauff, given the year that she's had, and some other singles players. But I don't know. This feels like the world number 1 and 2, and I think that's pretty accurate. How does it make me feel? I'm excited for these to be the world number 1 and number 2. Honestly, if that's the case moving forward, I don't think we can have better representation in our sport of two people carrying the torch for it. To have an Arabic woman, and we can use that phraseology. I saw that was pointed out by a friend of the show, Vivek, that there was commentators and let's say tennis journalists who are afraid to use that terminology when it came to Ons Jabeur. I think we're very happy to say it here, and I think we're very excited to see someone of that background represented at the top of our sport. In general, pretty fucking cool, Dev.
It's great stuff. On the men's side, Casper Ruud, he was also vying for world number 1 in this final. He was also vying for his first slam. He took a set this time, obviously, against Rafa at the French. I don't think anyone had much of a hope for him in that match, and justifiably so. But Simon, a large part of me thought, after he had taken the second set, that this could be in the cards for him because of his fitness level and the fact that he had played just generally less than Carlos Alcaraz. But someone who also looked a bit tight, and someone who I think found his way into the match a bit later than he would have hoped, and I think a bit too late generally, and falling behind Alcaraz, who's a pretty good front runner as well, is no easy task. That being said, someone who's also had a pretty damn good year. I think much was made of the fact that he hasn't won your quote unquote big titles, but Simon, he changed some opinions. And I think he's won a lot of hearts on our Discord. I think people who've watched him play live also have a lot of great things to say about Casper Ruud. But he's backed up, I think, the talk and the justification of where he is in terms of the rankings by how well he's played this season, although he didn't get the big titles. I think that's a fair statement to say.
I'm going to say something which is surprising to you and maybe shocking to people who listen to this podcast. I think there's been a lot of disrespectful comments made towards him during the last 2 weeks about his status as potential world number 1 and being a Grand Slam finalist, and whether he deserves to be there and all the things. And I think also, he's not going to worry about it. And why on earth would he care about this? But in general, I think that he has been overlooked, certainly in terms of the way that journalists have presented him. And that was certainly presented in the coverage. I mean, the dude was barely talked about. And I know the Carlos Alcaraz story is a much more interesting one in a lot of ways, but I think the dude actually deserves a hell of a lot of respect. And I think that is something which has been lacking over the last little while. Glass houses, don't throw stones, given some of the comments that I've made about him. I've been incredibly, incredibly impressed by the end of the year that he's had, and indeed this tournament, because he's found a way to just beat everyone who's in front of him and just have that dogged determination to see off challenges. The players that he beat in this tournament are no joke. Like to topple Berrettini, to beat Kachanov, to do all those sort of things in the stakes that they were in. I've been really, really impressed by him.
I was hoping that Mea Culpa was going to involve a full I was wrong, and I'm sorry, Casper. We didn't get it, though, but I think small steps for Simon on his road to redemption here. I was desperately hoping Casper Ruud would win this as well, Simon, because I think my quest for second place in our fantasy draft fell short. Pog, on the back of Iga Swiatek's win, takes the silver medal. I believe Vanch was just the runaway winner. I do not have confirmation on the final scores. I will update this, but yes, Pog, if you're listening to this, congrats. I'm devastated, Simon, but a good time was had. I think our picks generally hit. We had everyone involved in the Final Four at least, and we had some of the surprise players as well. I wanted to go from Casper Ruud to Frances Tiafoe, and maybe part of the reason Castle Route was kind of buried in terms of the coverage just because we had Alcaraz, but also we had Frances Tiafoe, who after I think the Serena story faded and after the Coco story faded when she was eliminated, it was all about Foe on the American broadcast. And I mean, how could it not be? What an incredible tournament for him.
And what an incredible match that he wasn't successful in, but he has no shame at all in losing that semi-final the way that he did, because I thought he was dead and buried multiple times in this match and still somehow found a way to take it to 5 and had his chances as well. He had multiple chances, I think, to stick in it in that final set to turn it and had the crowd on his side. He isn't just a player now that his, a mid-30s ranking and is a nice also ran. I think he showed in this tournament that he is capable of making significant runs in Grand Slams. It does remain to be seen, though, of whether or not he's able to put that together again and again, or whether this was just a glass slipper kind of situation, a Cinderella story of managing to get a good run and beat players that he had not necessarily favorable matches, but players that he would want to beat and would expect to win against. I was, again, impressed by his tournament, and I think he showed me that he is more than the sum of his parts at this point. I could see him being in the latter stages of Grand Slams a few more times in his career, because he's got so much damn heart and so much damn fight, and he's pretty damn talented as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is Francis's top level is good enough to beat the best players in the world. And we saw that with Rafa Nadal, who perhaps he wasn't the Rafa Nadal of mid-season, but still someone who had not been beaten at a damn Grand Slam this whole damn year, Simon. So I think that the ability to do that at all, for me, is that's okay. You can do that. There's a handful of people who can right now, maybe even less than that. So the consistency factor and the fact that maybe he will be around, I mean, I think he'll be in the top 20 now seeded wise, but that's maybe where he'll be for a while. And I don't know if he'll be a top 10 player, but that high end talent that can come out at a Slam or a Masters 1000 is good enough to win these tournaments. And I mean, that's more than enough. I think American tennis was waiting for some sort of return, especially with maybe a window there with this post-Serena phase that I think that the sport finds itself in America. It was Foe to take that next step and galvanize the wider sporting public, because I think once again tennis managed to stay in the conversation after Serena signed, which I don't know it was what any of us really expected. Because I think that after that Friday night, there was a bit of a lull and we were waiting to see who would pick up this tournament. And we ended on a great note, but I think in this middle chapter, it was all about Foe and Coco as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the name. Coco Gauff is the name. She is the next one in terms of American tennis and in terms of being at the pinnacle of the sport. I think, again, this week we saw enough from her to indicate that she will very, very soon be a Grand Slam champion. And it's been a slow burn for people who wanted a 14-year-old to win a Grand Slam, and we'll have to probably wait until she's 19 or 20 to do that. But I, again, saw enough this week that transition from Serena Williams is going to continue on the women's side. It's going to be a while, I think, before we can expect to see an American player win on the men's, but it's not going to be too long till we see another woman from America win a Grand Slam.
Agreed. A few more moments. Once again, Sinner Alcaraz, just special. I'm curious, Simon. I saw Owen put out the call, Tennis Nation put out the call who was going to win the match beforehand, and you had picked Sinner. I'm curious why you thought that, and then what happened in the match to maybe change.
The reason I picked him was based upon his performance at Wimbledon, purely and simply, was that he handled Alcaraz so easily. And I thought he is a favorable matchup, because I think if it's the one area that you see Alcaraz struggle with, it is pace, and it's consistent pace and someone that can move with him as well. And Jannik Sinner is a gorgeous, gorgeous lateral mover. Like one of the most eye-catching movers you'll see on a tennis court, just of how easily and gracefully he moves side to side on a tennis court. And I've called him the straw before, based on that old quote of it's playing him is like being sucked into a straw. Like, it's just so suffocating. And I think that's one thing that those two players have in abundance, is that they put so much pressure consistently, point after point after point. And if there's one thing I think that Nadal can take credit for, is that relentlessness that I think both players have. And I think Alcaraz probably is further along in that, but Sinner is just so, just suffocating. I can't think of a better word to describe it other than that. And I think that's one area that Alcaraz is still getting up to speed with. You can say he passed that test because he beat him, despite the fact that Sinner had match point. He got closer than anyone else did during the course of the week.
That was phenomenal. I want to say Caroline Garcia's performance in general was quite great till the stunning match against Ons Jabeur. That match against Coco Gauff, it was fascinating to see someone in Caroline Garcia who was still missing. It wasn't like she was just perfect, Simon, but the verve of her play and the willingness to truly adhere to the ethos of her game and strike first tennis and play through the middle of the court, but hit the ball as hard as you damn can. That run was fantastic. I loved watching her. We had Jess Pegula crushing a Heineken in the press conference after losing, which I think everyone needed a Heineken after watching that match with Iga.
I thought it was funny, right? We texting back and forth or WhatsApping back and forth, and I think both came to the agreement that was utter trash. It was just absolute shit. What? That's not going down in the record books, that match.
And I'm glad Iga had won off the back of this, so we never have to talk of this match again, really, because it is really just a footnote in the damn thing. But Pegula drinking a Heineken after the match in order to supply urine for her drug test can indicate that, yes, billionaires are people too, Simon.
Yes, perhaps indicating that she was about to buy Heineken as a company.
Ooh, boy. What else? What else stood out? I mean, Jack Draper, we talked about him a bit last week. That weird moment where Rafa smashed his own face in. That was weird with his nose. Pog mentioned that. Pog also mentioned something, Simon, that I think is interesting. Nick Kyrgios, utterly devastated when he lost his match to Karen Khachanov. And I think a lot of the Nick Kyrgios scuttlebutt or the banter has been like, he's not applying himself, but when he does, oh, you better look out. And when he really tries, he's unstoppable. But he tried his damn hardest, and it wasn't good enough. And I think that's something as well that maybe clicked for Nick as he realized he had lost with that mindset.
You love to see it, don't you, Dev? When bad things happen to good people. Oh, wait a minute.
The captain of the douchebags.
Yes, absolutely. I said this year, I think when I was asked about it or when we were talking about it, that peak Nick Kyrgios is world number 6 or whatever it is, or number 7. I think I still stick with that. No shame in it, but he's not world number 1. He's not world number 2, and he's not a top 5 player. And all the talk about how talented he is, and he's monumentally talented. He's a Grand Slam finalist. He's a Grand Slam winner in doubles. I even think applying himself, he's not a top 5 player. And I think that might sting for him. And I think this tournament really will sting for him as well, because he would have expected to beat Karen Khachanov. He really would have. He beat him at the Australian Open in a similar sort of match. He could not return Khachanov's serve. It was embarrassing to watch that match. I'm allowed to go in on him here because, he's kind of a prick. But he looked like a serve bot during the course of that match and just didn't have enough to get across the line.
As stated, you hate to see it. Back to 2K and playing with his bros. In Australia, Priyanka also on the Discord mentioning some top moments. That Muguruza-Kvitova match was fantastic. I think that one will be remembered for some OGs still hanging and still producing some top flight tennis at a critical point of the tournament. That was fantastic, Simon. I think I like what I saw from Arya Sabalenka as well. I know she fell to Iga Swiatek in the semifinals, but I think the path that a lot of these players have had to take this summer, mainly the Russian and Belarusian players, and having things just be generally super strange and awkward, not being allowed to go to Wimbledon, we saw it affect players differently. I don't know if this had anything to do with that, Simon, but Andrei Rublev breaking down while losing to Francis Tiafoe was also something that stuck with me.
It's one of the most memorable moments I have from the tournament myself is seeing the tears flow from Andrei Rublev. Really wanted it, didn't he? And I think it's just been such a difficult summer for him in general that it must have really, really hurt in that moment. And I think his reaction on court is testament to that. He said some things. I know he's not necessarily liked by some corners of the internet. I still kind of like him and kind of enjoy watching him. And it was kind of heartbreaking to watch that. I think I will just touch on one thing as well. Like the Sabalenka-Swiatek match, Sabalenka's going to want that one back. And she's starting to build a portfolio of matches she's going to want back, because at some point the penny will drop. The straw will break the et cetera, and she will win one of these and she will win a Grand Slam. But moments like that really give you pause sometimes, because she was up a break in that final set. She lost 11 points in a row to basically hand the initiative back. And it's not like Swiatek did anything other than just put the ball in play. And I'm aware that putting the ball in play is still extremely difficult at the highest level. But there is a pretty strong catalogue of her falling apart in those moments. And at some point, she's going to have to get that solved and get it figured out.
I got one more. Matthew Perry from Friends being at the final and Iga Swiatek calling him out on Twitter, and Matthew Perry replying was funny and stupid, and I enjoyed it. I don't know how many other 21-year-olds are like current with Friends or like watch Friends. I feel like this is rare. So I also want to shout out Iga for keeping me current, because this is something that I did, and I know as someone who watched Friends as well.
Who? I don't know who Matthew Perry is.
Good God. Oh, mid-30s confirmed. Anything else, Simon? Anything else from the tournament that stood out?
Lots of stuff, but we can probably get into it in parting shots, because we had history made on the doubles as well, which will be fun to dig into.
That and a whole lot of other stuff to get to, including some off-court news, when we come back for parting shots, coming up next on Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. It's that time again, parting shots, another slam in the books, the final slam of 2022. Simon, where did the time go? Hey, wow.
What a year. All over the place. Anyway, we can summarize some of the other big stories which happened at the back end of the final, or let's say the latter stages of this Grand Slam, the final Grand Slam of the year. And let's kick it off with kudos and plaudits and everything you can possibly say. We alluded to it a few weeks ago, but it is the case. Barbara Krejcikova, Katerina Siniakova have now done it all, Dev. They won everything. You can't achieve anything else as a team. They've done everything. Incredible achievement. And a really good final as well. They had to dig deep to see off Katie McNally and Taylor Townsend. Taylor Townsend having just a wonderful presentation ceremony and a runners-up speech. For those who know, it was really entertaining to see her share the stage with Patrick McEnroe, looking daggers through him, and rightfully so. Very entertaining to watch. Shout out Taylor Townsend, and absolutely fuck everyone else at the USTA, because she deserves so much more respect. But this moment, I think, is reserved for Krejcikova and Siniakova. They did it, Dev. They did it.
The career Golden Slam completed their third Grand Slam of the year. Barbara Krejcikova, the one kid OG. We love her forever. And Siniakova, just an amazing doubles player. What a story for them. And Taylor Townsend forever. Like you said, yes, we had the final as they're flying Chris Fowler all over the world, basically, to cover NCAA football in the US Open. One final slap in the face. They had brothers McEnroe and Chris Fowler on the men's call to end this tournament. Couldn't give us Darren Cahill, couldn't give us some Brad Gilbert. No, McEnroe squared.
Just for the record, that's the worst commentary team in tennis. I really believe it. It's singularly the most uninspiring and least pleasant commentary team to listen to in all of tennis. I'm happy to be on the record with saying that.
You got to surround Johnny Mac with some talent these days. He can't carry the show. So I think he needs some reinforcements. I agree. Night matches, late finishes. I think this was a big story as well. That Alcaraz Sinner match ended extremely late on the East Coast to North America, I believe just before 3 a.m. So the chances that a lot of people missed that are high. I mean, it was a weekday as well. And this wasn't the only time this happened. I think the Cilic match ended at 2:24 a.m. Simon, I saw some people on Twitter who are maybe tennis adjacent saying like that. I don't think tennis fans understand how bad it is that this match ended at 3 a.m. and everyone missed it. And I think the retort is, I think we all realize this is really bad and not good. And we got to limit the night session to one match and adjust pricing to reflect this, because it is quite ridiculous and they have to change this.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think it's one of those things that this really should be the case of where a union steps in and stops this sort of thing happening, because it can't go on. It can't go on regardless of what broadcasters want or the akin to. But why would a broadcaster want this to go until 3 a.m. in the morning as well? Like, no one's watching it. I understand the West Coast, but like, no one's watching it fucking midnight on the West Coast either. Like, that's ridiculous. Aware that America is not the entire world, so some other markets may have been watching that match as well. But I wanted to just quickly give a shout out to David Law. Carlos Alcaraz won his match against Marin Cilic at 2:24. He came to the press conference at 3 a.m. After warming down any treatment, he probably goes to bed at 6 a.m. Tennis is the only sport that does this. It should actively try and find a way to stop doing it. There is some passive voice in there, it has to be said, Dev, and it does start with the idea that you might want to have a union.
Shots fired. Okay, I mean,
if only there was a solution to this. Like,
I see no lies.
Racking my brain here.
Will somebody think of the children, right?
If only I had a platform to do something about this.
This manic fear that we have of post Big Three life or post Serena life, and what are we going to do, and like, how is tennis going to survive? Having this Alcaraz Sinner match end at a time reasonable, I think, for the viewing audience would have been nice. It would have been quite nice. But I mean, not everything is about marketing either. I need to stop doing that, I think, which is just a curse. But anyways, not to dwell on that too much, Simon. We're recording this on Final Sunday. It is 9/11. It has been 21 years since the event. You'll have noticed, I think they put the 9/11 decals on the courts for these two finals, so heading into the weekend, Simon. But it's been some time, and I think we saw Casper Ruud mention the moment. But I'm just curious your thoughts on the commemoration as we stand here today in 2022.
I'll be honest, Dev. I don't really have an opinion because
you're opinionless, yeah.
I'm kind of opinionless. I kind of ran away from it this year. That I didn't really want to. I don't find it particularly interesting, I guess. And also, it's not something that I really seek out in the same way. So I'm kind of opinionless, which I guess is not great for a podcast host sometimes.
I think it's totally fair. You don't need an opinion on everything. And I think perhaps some more people should take this track. I do find it. It's like Carlos Alcaraz wasn't even born yet when this happened. So that's the fact that he would answer any sort of question about this or like address it. I do find it interesting, I would say. And I think Casper was the one who addressed it for everyone. But yeah, I mean, time flies in a weird way as well. And it does feel like yesterday how it was a big deal in terms of sports and how we commemorate things and how the day is used as a symbol of unity and perhaps something to wave the flag and say never forget and go on with our day like usual. I think we kind of get a glimpse of that on this anniversary. But it just reminded me of last year as well, Simon, when you had Layla and Emma talking about it as well. But it falls also on the back of Queen Elizabeth's death and the fact that they canceled the Premier League football and other soccer in England over the weekend, and then some other sports did continue, which I found interesting, Simon. And I do think this confluence of sports and daily life and sports and politics and choosing to do what, when, and honoring the Queen in these American events and finding that interesting. I mean, it's been quite a wild couple days.
Saw a very funny tweet during the course of the week that basically said that the president could be assassinated on live television on CNN and the NFL would never cancel games, which I thought was a really good encapsulation of perhaps the differences in the society in some capacity. Yeah. This was a ridiculous week in many ways, I'm sure. I'm I guess, shockingly to the people who listen to this podcast, I'm a very proud Republican and would abolish the royal family tomorrow if I could. But it's always entertaining in some ways to see how a nation manages to still have this royal family at the heart of its psyche and at the heart of its real status, I guess, identity in a lot of ways. And it's going to be fascinating to watch how that continues with a figure in Charles who is not beloved and not liked and really not particularly inspiring in a lot of ways. And I'm curious to see how that nets out in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any love for the monarchy at all myself. And I think that I found it very interesting to see the reaction on the day it happened as well, between people who were taking this deathly seriously and who were heartbroken and people who were having a great old time because the monarchy stands for some awful things that was done in their name, and lands pillaged and people destroyed and lives destroyed. And the Queen was a pretty big symbol of that. But I did see some parallels between the 9/11 commemoration and the commemoration of the Queen, and how sports are just so intertwined now in this landscape, and that will only strengthen, I think, going forward. But it'll be done in stranger ways, with weird taglines associated with brands accompanied with these commemorations. It'll all feel even grimier than it does now, Simon. So can't wait for that.
You mean like Hamilton and Les Miserables tweeting out commemorations to the Queen? I mean, Jesus, like, watch your own fucking musical.
I saw Lin-Manuel Miranda standing applauding for Alcaraz, but he did kind of like a "can you believe this" kind of symbol, and it kind of looked like he was like doing a standing ovation kind of like receiving it himself. And I wanted to yell "sit down," but I realized I was sitting at home and watching through a screen, Simon. But yeah, anyways, moving on to talk about some more Brits.
Indeed so. So the men's doubles final was an all-British affair on one half of it. So Reggie Ram and Joe Salisbury won this final, beating Wesley Koolhof and Neo Skupski. Britain knows how to produce doubles players, doesn't it, at this point, Dev? Goodness me. We Queensway. Oh, God, Kingsway.
Wow,
excuse me.
It's happening.
Shit. What's happening to me? Oh, Jesus. Yes. Maybe I'll just leave it here as well. And it should also be noted that Lloyd Glasspool also made the quarterfinals here. We have a really good crop of doubles players, and it's really cool to see.
Salisbury, Skupski on that Davis Cup team. The Davis Cup is a thing that is happening, in case you wanted to forget or try to forget, and it's happening very soon. Simon, I saw a video with Cam Norrie and Andy Murray. It looks like Dad Evans got his wish, though. Jack Draper is not on the team. He also was injured, though. So I did see Felix Auger-Aliassime will play for the Canadians, which is a welcome development. But yeah, Davis Cup heads, that is beginning. I'll go next, Simon. And we both put this in here, which just rarely happens, but it's meant to be. Alex Ila won the girls' championship, the first Filipino to do that. And also, she was featured in that Rafa Nadal Academy documentary on Prime, Simon, that I talked about on here, I want to say a year ago, last summer. So fascinating to see this happen with that in mind, Simon, and seeing the Rafa Nadal Academy have another phenomenal couple weeks. I saw all of Castle Root's people decked out in that Academy gear as well.
Yeah, I really should watch that at some point.
A lot of these people involved are now like involved in the tour and winning stuff.
Very good. I will just do one more here, just to give a shout out to Alfie Hewitt, who won the wheelchair singles. Alfie Hewitt's. Let's say I'll do this for you. From 2020. Semi-final, winner, final, winner, quarterfinal, final, semi-final, final, winner. Dude's pretty good at tennis.
That's pretty amazing. Incredible stuff. I mentioned off the top of the show, the US Open having some new divisions. They had junior wheelchair singles, I believe for the first time, Simon, which is awesome to see. Jade Moria-Lanai winning the women's competition from Brazil. Really fantastic stuff, but it's awesome to see more of these competitions opening, Simon, and them being accessible, I think, for an age group that maybe we don't see these athletes until the senior competition only because there's no tournaments to be held for them now. But this seems to be changing, and that's excellent.
Absolutely. And the Dutch continuing their domination within the quad singles and doubles as well, which that nation has supported that discipline as well in so many ways, and it's being paid off handsomely as well. So, I mean, we can go down the list of all of the results, but we'd be here for days and days and days. One other thing I will mention just to sign off, mixed doubles was won by John Peers and Storm Sanders, who, god damn, it's a good name.
Whew. Is that a Fantastic Four character?
It should be.
Yeah. Kirsten Flipkins as well in the final, who's a G. So sad for her. But finally, Simon, another G, friend of the show, Juan Martín Del Potro, in attendance in New York, watching some amazing tennis. He was there for Sinner Alcaraz, but a lot of amazing behind-the-scenes content. I think we saw Andy Roddick and Ons Jabeur have a great moment as well. I think Ons was a big Andy fan back in the day who didn't love the visor and frosted tips, but peak behind-the-scenes content this week. Delpo hugging it out with Francis Tiafoe. That was wonderful. Delpo, probably the best hugger of all time, I think, on both tours. There's no debate.
Yes, loved the visor and frosted tips. Did not love the MAGA hat, to finish that sentence off. Del Potro does look like a good hugger.
That's reportedly, sir. We can't say that confirmed. That is not sourced at all.
All right, put it on me. It's not a podcast. It's on me. Okay, so one final question before we get to two challenges remaining. Iga Swiatek was promised a tiramisu, which did not materialize the French Open. It did materialize here at the US Open. One question to you, Devang. You have just won the US Open. Which dessert would you like to see inside of your winner's trophy?
Oh, God. I've been on a real dessert kick lately, actually. And I wouldn't mind like a honey cruller type donut. It's just the entire thing.
Just one giant one in the trophy?
Yeah, exactly. I think that'd be great. What about you?
Easy man to please. I would go with something very specific. I would want a stack of Marks and Spencer's profiteroles. That's what I would like, covered in chocolate fondant. If you know on this one, and I'm really excited to go back to the UK in a few weeks' time just to eat some of the desserts. Not really to go to the country, but to eat some of the things that I grew up with.
So ridiculously specific. Amazing. Okay, 2 challenges remaining, Simon. I'll let you go first. Dark days in politics. Woo!
Yeah, hopefully you can see us off in a way that's not what I'm about to say. My 2 home nations, so I grew up in the United Kingdom and now I've lived in Canada for 10 years, both have new Conservative Party leaders. And they each represented some really interesting stuff through the course of this week in Liz Truss and Pierre Bolivar. This is an evolution of conservatism to be more and more extreme and more and more right-wing. And I think there has to be an answer to this. And I think those of us who find ourselves not just left-leaning, but fully in the position of having left-wing views and wanting to see a more equitable society and also not wanting to see the planet burn, you've got to start stepping up on this stuff because in the case of Pierre Poilievre, this is a very skilled operator who is very, very soon going to be the Prime Minister of Canada, and Liz Truss already is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So I was just putting that note out there because it's interesting to see 2 people who have very, very extreme views probably going to be the head of the country that I currently live in and is the head of the country that I left.
Woof, yeah. I mean, that Canadian election is not happening for 3 years. Is that correct, Bush?
Sure, let's go with that.
A lot of garbage in between now and then. Can't wait for that. Yeah, I won't go that route. I had 2 ideas, but I will say it's TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival in Toronto. It's back, I think I would say, in full force this year after a pandemic kind of version last year and then not having it at all the year before. But I live quite close to the proceedings down here, Simon, and it's a great time. And I do feel like it's been a wonderful way to close summer out. It's just beginning, but they've closed out the streets and people are walking them. There's no cars around. Feels accessible. Feels like people are having a good time watching movies with their friends, and that's always good too. So the vibes are good generally, even though summer ending is usually depressing. So I'm feeling positive, Simon, about the road ahead.
Yes, ban cars from cities. Ban that drum again.
Right?
It would be nice.
Please. Would be nice. All right. That is it for another edition of the Open Era podcast. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/Open Era. Join us there, get the show ad free, get it early on Sundays when we record. Plus, join our Discord where we're chatting tennis all the time, including all hours of the day. These last couple of weeks talking US Open. It was a blast. Thanks to everyone in our Discord who makes it so great. Truly, it's a wonderful community, and I have a blast spending time in there. So thanks to everyone in there. We're on Twitter as well, @OpenEraPod. And if you could be so kind and you do like the show, leave us a rating or a review wherever you get this podcast. That would be so very nice. For producer Greg on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.